We're about to dive into the newest lore available regarding the father of Primaris Space Marines, Belisarius Cawl, and his maniacal antithesis, the man-flayer, primogenitor, Fabius Bile. Spoiler warning, these events are from the new Black Library novel Genefather by Guy Haley. This summarised retelling involves a host of new lore and events which are extremely fun to learn about. However, not all events can fit into a video, so at the conclusion I've noted several shocking new lore points to tell you about. So make sure you stick around throughout the story to the end, you will not regret it. Right, before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. All of these help our small channel and community to grow. Good on ya. Is Belisarius Cawl's supremely confident outlook beginning to undermine and overtake his actual ability? Or is the Archmagos, the being responsible for resurrecting a Primarch, actually as talented as he believes himself to be? If there is one being in the entire galaxy capable of matching wits with the man who has effectively reinvented Astartes warfare, it is Fabius Bile, Clone Lord, Manflayer, Primogenitor, Pater Mutatus. The ongoing battle between an ever-dwindling Imperium against the forces of chaos and disorder continue now, in this newest addition to 40k lore. Listen on. Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl, though he has achieved so much in the name of mankind, must persevere through Lord Regent Roboute Guilliman's demands yet further. For those not aware, Cawl is single-handedly responsible for the creation of not only the Primaris Marines, but also all of their associated weapons and gear. A gargantuan feat in and of itself, and one which took millennia to complete. This of course is not all the Archmagos has achieved within his almost 11,000 year lifespan, but it is one of the latest, and indeed perhaps the greatest contributions to date that he has made to bettering mankind's lot within the galaxy. However, compared to this historical feat, Roboute Guilliman's most recent demand may surpass it in both the technical skill required, as well as the effect its successful completion would have on the Imperium's future. When Belisarius Cawl departed Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade, he had made the Regent a promise. He swore to save the Imperium, and while such a grand promise is in line with Belisarius Cawl's arrogance, the Archmagos has proven multiple times that he is capable of achieving what to others may seem impossible. During his latest work on the planet of Sotha, using the Pharos beacon, Cawl has located several sites across the breadth of the galaxy where Noctilith can be found. This material, more commonly known as Blackstone, has the effect of limiting warp-fueled energies in its presence. This is important because to keep Cawl's promise to the Lord Regent, he must construct his own version of the ancient Necron tier pylons with the aim of assembling enough of them in the correct pattern to close the Cicatrix Maledictum permanently. Like I said, arrogance and ability in equal measure. You can see why Roboute Guilliman demands updates on works so vital as this. Nevertheless, even though Cawl has gone so far as to distribute his many servants throughout the stars to these Noctilith resources, and despite his ability to create these warp-dampening constructions, he is yet unable to determine how a series of pylons work in concert to close warp rifts. Cawl is due to display this very effect upon a small tear in real space called the Raucous Rift, and Guilliman grows impatient for news. He states to Cawl via transmission that he is no tyrant, that if Cawl's previous promise is not achievable, the Lord Regent will adjust his strategy in turn, though I think we all know that Archmagos Belisarius Cawl is not one to give up so easily, even when he'd rather be doing something else. Aside from this master work, Guilliman also demands a host of new Primaris be sent to his own Crusade fleet. There was a third, perhaps even more intriguing demand, but you can find that at the end of this video, along with several other points omitted from this retelling, as they do not at this point affect our immediate plot. Cawl learns that within Imperium Nihilus, the Space Marine chapters present therein have experienced drastic casualties at the hands of the archenemy. Guilliman's unnumbered sons are largely disbanded now, and so he cares not how the Archmagos achieves this latest task, but to enact plans to these ends now with all haste, and make for Guilliman's fleet's position. If he is too late to rendezvous with the Primarch, Cawl's reinforcements must make the crossing themselves to meet the avenging sun on the other side within Nihilus. So it is that Belisarius Cawl has quite the task ahead of him. Not only this, due to the far-reaching effect these tasks will have in the ongoing battle against the arch-enemy, his time in achieving them is limited, and the issue of operating multiple Blackstone pylons simultaneously still remains unsolved. To address that issue, Cawl knows he must give life to machine spirits which allow multiple pylons to synchronize completely, though fetching the knowledge to do this will require allies. And so Cawl reaches out to Forge worlds which contain high-profile supporters of his innovations as well as his achievements. They are the Forge worlds of Akatran, Metallica, and Tigris. To achieve the next stage of his plans in a timely manner, the Magos requires vast resources and an army to match his ambitions. Cawl requests the presence of these Forge worlds upon the artificial planet known as Pontus Avernus in the months to come. He must proceed with caution, however, as what he intends to do with these allies, the process by which he needs to use to gain the knowledge to synchronize these pylons, he anticipates will so enrage the Primarch. To be honest, it borders on the very unwise. But Cawl is nothing if not one who so favours reward gained in the face of overwhelming risk. Meanwhile, within a different system entirely, a dark mirror of Cawl and Rebute's undertakings play out. Upon an unnamed desolate planet whose ancient name had long been forgotten, an agent of ruination and rebirth seeks to further his own ends whilst placating the demands of an entirely more ruinous master than that which issues orders to Belisarius Cawl. Fabius Bile, erstwhile Lord Lieutenant of the Emperor's Children and master of his own fate, parleys with agents of the Dark Mechanicum to further the whims of Abaddon the Despoiler. Soon the objective Fabius has sought for the last 5 years will be his for the taking. But first he must discover where in the Milky Way galaxy the loyalist Magos Cawl currently resides. It has taken them months, but the servants of the Dark Mechanicum, the disciples of Newell, have learnt the details the chief apothecary so covets. Through much posturing and even veiled threats, a final trade is agreed upon, in exchange for a man of iron that Fabius Bile has within his possession. The disciples of Newell will not only provide the coordinates of Belisarius Cawl's conclave to the primogenitor, they will aid him in person, as well as providing the resources of a particularly powerful Lord of Chaos, Dandamus Thruel. His army so powerful, they would prove the match of the esteemed Archmagos' own forces, and with this dark pact, events are set in motion. On one side, the forces of the Mechanicus seek to close the tear in real space that is the Cicatrix Maledictum, while simultaneously manufacturing adequate reinforcements to make ingress into the damned reaches of Imperium Nihilus, the latter no small task in itself. Whilst the forces of the arch-enemy devise their own plot, towards an end that at this time is unknowable, though for the fickle, fiercely independent Bile to willingly work towards the whims of the War Master, let alone trade such a powerful, rare relic as a man of iron, the reward must be valuable indeed. Meanwhile, whilst Belisarius Cawl awakened yet another version of his long-dead friend Quo, number 89 at this point, Bile and his retinue touched down on the planet of Godrenval. Before meeting with the corrupted Astartes' Lord Thruel, Fabius would unveil to the accompanying Dark Mechanicus operative that which he sought from Cawl on behalf of Abaddon. The priceless artifact known as the Sang Primus Portum is a device which contains all remaining data pertaining to the creation of Space Marines and Primarchs alike. It was with this valuable data that Cawl could achieve the feats he did regarding the mass production of Primaris Space Marines. It makes sense that Abaddon would seek such a relic, enabling his own primogenitors to mass create legionnaires, superior even to his own Black Legion. Upon the artificial flat world of Pontus Avernus, Cawl's forces would make planetfall in preparation for the conclave he had called. Pontus Avernus is an artificial planet held in suspension by the system's other planets and its blue sun by way of some technological marvel from years long past, bordering on the miraculous. Other than a mountain range, the artificial world was completely flat. But whilst Cawl's bodyguards, knights and Scutari made planetfall, and the armoured hosts belonging to Achatrans, Metallica and Tigris made their way into the ziggurat which would play host to the assembly, a figure swathed in darkness watched from a vantage point above. Elixir Dias, a servant of the Dark Mechanicum, surveyed the imperial forces before her as the Archmagos made to accompany his allies inside. Still as yet undiscovered by those loyalists below, masked as she was by warp devices forged by the Dark Mechanicum, Elixir utilised a demonic flask which was a communication device to alert those she served that the Archmagos had arrived on Avernus. With that, she made ready to greet Belisarius Cawl below. Amidst the conclave chronulus, Cawl called forth a holographic projection of the galaxy above the audience before him. Suddenly, the sky was cleaved in half, replaying the most disastrous event in recent history. As all the Mechanicus servants within the ziggurat watched on in awe, purple light ran along the centre of the projection, dividing the audience under the two halves of the Milky Way galaxy, Imperium Sanctus and Nihilus. Cawl states that we can surmise if this was not the ultimate goal of Abaddon, then it plays a crucial role in his plans, for this event was foreseen by the most ancient of races, and they took steps to prevent it. Green lights ignited along the rift as Cawl went on explaining. Many of us have an inkling of the war in heaven between the Old Ones and their foes, the Necrons, many millions of years ago. I surmise their conflict weakened the fabric of reality, causing this fault line which Abaddon has exploited. The green specks Necron pylon worlds we knew of were long ago put into place to stop the Eye of Terror from widening. New bright yellow lights appeared within the map, hundreds of them. These worlds are pylon worlds we have recently discovered by using the Pharos beacon upon Solus. The Pharos beacon was one of a set within a relay which allowed instantaneous travel between these relay sites, and was in fact the most intact until its recent destruction. By accessing the databanks within the Pharos, Cawl was able to attain the whereabouts of every Necron tomb world, every pylon world, and every source of Noctilith within the galaxy. "If you help me," Cawl announced to the assembly of tech priests and magi, "I will pay you with this knowledge." Cawl could practically feel the excitement within the assembly. That data was priceless. But what would Cawl demand of them in return? Surely, given the payment proffered, this would come at a very steep price. "I want you to help me save the Imperium," Cawl announced. Cawl explained he wishes to recreate the Necron technology, improve it by a means that it was not harmful to humans in the way recent Necron actions were proving elsewhere in the galaxy, and finally he wished to synchronize this new pylon system to the existing ones, closing the cicatrix maledictum. It is important that the Mechanicus, and indeed the Imperium, work towards this goal with haste, for surely were the Necron Empire able to succeed first, the effect of closing the massive warp rift may be achieved, however the effect on humanity could be disastrous. If the Mechanicus were successful, even smaller applications of similar devices could be used throughout the Imperium to battle the archenemy. Neverborn would cease to exist in its presence, corrupted sorcery would be robbed of its power, and instances of psychic births throughout the Imperium would plummet. Cawl explained he is in a position to begin manufacturing immediately, though, as we know already guys and girls, he lacks the fully integrated control system for the pylon network. He could create this himself, but the time required would likely surpass what fate could give them. Upon the holographic map spanning the breadth of the Great Chamber, far to the south of Imperium Sanctus, Cawl zoomed into a black hole called Caligan's Maw. Upon the fringes of the great nothingness was a planet, its doom assured, slowly being pulled into the timeless depths of Caligan's Maw. Cawl had gleaned from the data within the Pharos that the Great Maw was a star collapsed by weapons in ancient times, catching the planet within the fringes of that effect. Unfortunately, upon the Pharos ancient Necron map, the planet which they called Itanethep was marked as containing a pylon control nexus, somewhat like the Pharos, but with a different purpose. It is Cawl's suspicion that the planet was attacked long ago, perhaps during the War of the Ancients, leading to the formation of Caligan's Maw. Though given that fact, while some of the Assembly believed the planet, being trapped for so long within the pull of Caligan's Maw, would yield no knowledge of this nexus, they were in fact corrected, for when a planet is caught within the pull of a black hole, time is almost completely stopped. Any species upon that planet, likely predating humanity's evolution even, would have experienced mere seconds since their sun's destruction, whilst eons have passed in real space. But to land upon that unnamed trapped planet would require a gargantuan amount of resources, and this is merely the first step on the path to closing the Cicatrix Maledictum. Cawl showed upon the holographic map the effect which Abaddon's Black Crusades had enacted upon the Pylon worlds over time. With each successive Black Crusade, more Pylon worlds were wiped from the map. Eventually, by the time Cadia fell, between Abaddon's efforts and the worlds the Imperium had ignorantly destroyed, only a few hundred remained. The task ahead, that of replacing the Pylon system, was gargantuan. Meanwhile, Fabius, his Dark Mechanicus allies, and their accompanying army in the form of Chaos Lord Thurul's forces drew close to Pontus Avernus, activating a stolen webway gate upon their corrupted vessel. The forces of the Dark Mechanicum, 1,000 servitors strong alone, began the process of reawakening, directives of war and violence coalescing throughout their databanks. As the corrupted forces drew closer, ready to challenge the Imperial's own, Cawl's original Primaris, Alpha Primus, blessed with the gifts of the Psyker, detected Bile's forces on approach, and then, after requesting Cawl's presence back on his master's flagship, the Zarquazitor, almost immediately an odd, intruding presence was detected upon the vessel. Within Cawl's Museum Omnis, a solemn area of the ship Cawl rarely visited, due to the fact it is where he housed past pieces of himself, organs, memories of people he used to be, the origin of the intrusion was found. Walking out of the dark corners of the museum, cane in hand, a holographic projection of Fabius Bile stepped into Cawl's sight. Whilst the two spoke candidly, the Archmagos worked at triangulating the origin of Bile's holographic broadcast, and though the pair faced off now as the direst of enemies, their conversation was amicable enough, if not slightly confrontational. In response to Fabius' claims that he was not in fact a follower of the Pantheon, and that he believed Cawl's Primaris achievements were little more than improvements on the Emperor's design, Cawl did take offence. Ultimately, however, Fabius claimed they both wanted the same thing, to save humanity. Cawl could scarcely countenance this claim, besides pointing to Fabius that the Manflayer was at that moment wearing the skins of the species he apparently found so precious. Cawl reminded Fabius of the fact he'd associated with the very powers which sought to destroy humanity for the last 10 millennia. He stated besides that, Fabius had reinforced the very armies of chaos when not leading them himself. Cawl maintained files of the things Biles had created from innocent Imperial citizens, countless people tortured and twisted into grotesqueries. "You are pleading innocence with me, and I am astounded," Cawl stated. "There is no good or evil," Bile says, "only two forces equally bad as the other, locked in a death spiral. The Imperium is as rotten and degenerate as the forces of Abaddon are." But, Cawl asks, why do you serve Abaddon? If that is true, Why did you not use your talents for the forces of good? What do you think I am trying to do? Fabius states. Ultimately, Cawl did not believe Fabius' claims. For so many years he had worked with traitor forces instead of returning to the imperial fold. Though Fabius did make a fair point, both sides were ruled by despicable gods, those powers of the warp whose corrupting influence caused so much terror and suffering within the galaxy, and on the other side the master of mankind, a supreme being who feasts on the souls of his subjects. There is no justice, there is no kindness. We are at the mercy of false gods on all sides. And this is the part where you tell me how we should be rid of all gods, says Cawl. You are a cliché in a horrifying coat. Fabius did not bite back, but explained what had occurred recently with his new men. He agreed that he was cruel in the past, growing bored and disillusioned with his project's lack of progress. Fabius had abandoned his children, but upon his most recent reawakening, had become aware of their achievements. He explained that they are resistant to the powers of the warp, strong, healthy, invulnerable to age and disease. Fabius was speaking hurriedly, passionately. His new men, their societies, were egalitarian and just. All are satisfied to fill their role. Fabius claimed he now knew that the greatest creations must be like children, moulded by their maker, but not finished. The greatest creations finish themselves. He claimed to have cloned every Primarch, but every one of them failed. Rather than blaming the material, Fabius admitted that the fault was with himself. There ultimately was one aspect Fabius was missing to successfully recreate the Emperor's Primarchs. As they spoke, Cawl was honing in on Fabius' location. He was within the Avernus system, but it would take further time to triangulate his coordinates more exactly. Bile admitted that his first attempts at cloning Primarchs resulted in muling imbeciles, but as time wore on they improved, until they were perfect in every way. In fact, they were so perfect, the clones inherited their original's eventual decline to the corrupting allure of chaos. Bile believed all the Primarchs were irreversibly contaminated by the warp, even Rabute Guilliman. At this point, Cawl had guessed what Bile wished to achieve. He did not want to continue with his works recreating the Emperor's Primarchs. Fabius wished to create something even better, a being of Bile's own design, but with similar potential. Bile admitted he needed to. His new men required a king, someone to watch over their societies and guide them once Bile was no more. He stated that if Cawl gave him what he desired, Belisarius would have played his part in saving humanity. Bile claimed that with the Sang Primus Portum, not only would the corrupted followers of chaos be swept away, but all the threats to humanity's dominion of the stars would as well. Necrons, Tyranids, Orcs, all mankind's myriad foes. Let us cooperate, Bile said. You will be the benefactor of humanity itself. Whilst the two most powerful geneticists within the galaxy continued what was fast becoming deliberation concerning the best path forward for mankind as a species, underneath the flat scape of Pontus Avernus, the Dark Mechanicus spy Elixir had activated a webway gate to allow the forces of chaos ingress into the artificial planetoid. Not only this, she had caught Belisarius' friend Kvo, who had been following her and witnessing the webway portal activation. In an unfortunate turn of events, the servant of the Dark Mechanicus infiltrated the Zarquazitor's systems through Kvo. Ultimately, the talks between primogenitors failed when Belisarius began to laugh at Fabius' request, though Bile did in turn admit he was merely distracting the Archmagos, while his dark allies infiltrated the Zarquazitor's systems from their hidden place upon Avernus below. Systems began to fail, servitor skulls hurtling into walls, light and music switching on and off in eerie fashion. The Zarquazitor's thrusters began to propel the vessel for a direct course into Avernus. Alpha Primus was on the bridge. The situation had turned from one of investigation and readying for battle to one of pure chaos. An enemy strike crippling the entire vessel without revealing a hint of themselves to the Zarquazitor's guns. At Alpha Primus' request, a litany of woe was sounded off by the Lex Mechanic on the bridge. All critical systems were either down or under the enemy's control. The situation was dire. Just then, incredibly, a warp breach tore open in front of the Arch Mechanicus Zarquazitor. To translate in system in such a way, bypassing Mendeval points was practically suicidal, materializing from a patchy hellscape beyond, before Primus' very view on the bridge, was the Belisarius, Fabius Bile's own ship. Black boarding pods spread before it, aimed squarely for the Zarquazitor. Fabius forces were attempting to board Belisarius Cawl's enormous Arch Mechanicus vessel. Primus was no fool. He knew full well what a being such as Fabius would be after. Primus fled from the bridge, heading for the Sang Primus Portum. Simultaneously, the ground on Avernus began to rumble violently. Cawl's night patrol formed a defensive circle, strung out past the ziggurat and unable to contact other Mechanicus forces due to Vox channels being interrupted by malign forces. Lightning columns began to form between the pyramids on Avernus' surface. First one, then numerous pillars of light materialized, striking out into obviously unnatural shafts. They soon formed into regular intervals across the planet's surface. A deep horn could be heard as it rolled from some ether beyond the physical, followed by fractured, martial music. What appeared to be creatures of some alien breed and strangely dressed people seemed to flash then disappear as the lightning fields continued to gain solidity. Next, the lightning formed into round shapes. They were gates, made from some unknown energy source. Formless beings began to seemingly lumber towards the gates, until some workings beyond the knowledge of those present forced the portals into solidity, making the images beyond more clear now. Cantering into reality from some hellscape beyond were demon engines, unholy corrupted machines fused with Neverborn by arcane, forbidden sorcery. Great engines were mounted on their backs, many likely containing some crazed, violent demon, driving the consciousness of the debased machinery which now arrayed itself before the loyal knights of House Tyrannus. Suddenly, traitor Astartes also came into view, their portable heavy weapons opening up from the gate beyond. The well-drilled discipline characteristic of their kind was clear, as they split so efficiently into fire teams amidst the demonic engines of war. The Knights of House Tyrannus, loyal to Cawl's fleet, and ultimately to the Adeptus Mechanicus and Imperium itself, opened fire upon the heretic Astartes and demon engines. Their carapace-mounted rockets streaked towards larger demon engines, which were now loping towards the Knights. House Tyrannus battle cannons struck a timbre of death amidst the chaos lines, spitting up mud, grass, and chunks of ceramite where their aim was true. Eruptions of ceramite and transhuman flesh blossomed among the damned infantry, but it took far more to properly slay a man gifted by both the Emperor and the Chaos Gods, and the majority of Chaos Marines and Renegades alike who were knocked from their feet rose back up, continuing their advance upon the Knights and the main ziggurat beyond. Belisarius Cawl's enemies had finally located the Archmagos. His forces had known the day would come since they first departed Guilliman's Indomitus fleet. And so it was, the battle for Pontus Avernus was begun. Below the ziggurat in which the conclave Chronolus was held, dozens of combat servitors marched out of the webway gate activated by the traitor priestess. Scattered throughout the ranks of lobotomized cyborgs were tech priests dressed in black robes, marking them as followers of the Dark Mechanicum. Even though the corrupted tech priests were far removed from the allegiances and ethos of the more pure followers of the machine god, they too were visibly excited by the marvels of Avernus surrounding them, immediately setting to cataloguing their surrounds. Fabius, accompanied by Porter, strode within Belisarius' vessel the Zarquazitor, It was far larger than even the standard massive Arch Mechanicus vessels that its construction was based upon. The Zarquazitor was so immense that it contained its own shipyard. Fortunately for the forces of the Primogenitor, the Dark Mechanicus cyber attack on Cawl's vessel would mean its defenders were too busy arresting its plummeting trajectory towards Avernus to have time getting its arsenal back online. If its guns were in working order, it would have taken nothing short of an entire fleet to disable the Zarquazitor. It was the closest thing to a Forge World come Voidcraft Fabius had ever seen. Bile's status as a leader of Astartes had fallen in recent years. Besides his new man in the form of Porter, he had but mutants ready to storm Cawl's vessel, a rabble of beastmen which would fight alongside twisted, misbegotten mutants. Making the most of the poor quality of troops, Bile will use the arrogance of Cawl to his advantage. When Cawl's forces on board witnessed that little but mutants stood before them, they would rush to finish them off. This, Bile planned, would be their undoing. Planning to hold Porter in reserve when the Mechanicus forces were engaged with an inferior foe, she would intercept the most valuable targets within the melee. As Butcherbird, Bile's personal landing craft, touched down within the landing bay of Zarquazitor, the defence was fierce. Cawl had obviously built the most vulnerable part of the vessel with a scenario such as this in mind. Butcherbird's troop holding bay flooded with friend zone, working the mutants and beastmen alike into a bloody fury, their fur standing on end, beating their chests in anticipation of bloodshed for their master. Butcherbird's holding bay door slammed down as Bile, followed by a parade of beastmen and mutants, flooded the Zarquazitor's landing area. Rad warnings rang within Bile's Astartes helmet, but he ignored them. Beastmen were felled around him, folding in masses of blood and fur. Others, hit by the Mechanicus' notorious rad weapons, continued their aggressive charge towards the Skitarii lines, though they would die after the battle due to radioactive effects of that weaponry. Their bioengineered toughness as shock troops of the Primogenitor would see them through this skirmish. After all, the hordes of beastmen which lived in the bowels of Bile's ship, the Belisarius, were cannon fodder. Bile only stepped in occasionally to tweak genes within the herds, but other than that, their own societal codes ensured only the strong survived, making for hardy stock. As Bile and his creations stormed the landing bay, yet more ships made their way inside, landing down amid withering fire from the defences Cawl himself had so obviously personalised. The scene was intense. Bile's mutants ran headlong into the Skitarii lines. Fear, bravery, and no small dose of friend zone, charging the misbegotten creatures with the will to do so. Ordered, drilled lines of Skitarii loosed volley after volley into the charging creatures, timing their shots so as to ensure maximum casualties and psychological effect on Bile's creations, in the hope they may rout. Entire rows of mutants were felled, though the front lines were merely meat shields for the larger, more capable beasts behind. It was not only Bile's creations which waded into the thick melee. The Primogenitor himself was an ancient Astartes after all, of the accomplished as well as capable Third Legion nonetheless. His demon rod torment laid low foe after foe, the pain receptors in many of them burning out completely, Skitarii bodies smoking and lifeless as Bile, with minimal attention spared for his foes, made his way to the hangar door, whilst keeping a sharper eye on how his creations performed in the field. He smiled as his herds pierced further into the ship, calling Porter to his side as her time would soon come. Elsewhere in the Zarquazitor, Alpha Primus sprinted through the vessel, headed for the St. Primus. Over what little of the Voxnet was operational, the immense psychic Astartes ordered all available forces to the bulk Magnificans, where the Emperor's knowledge was stored. He could not allow it to fall into Bile's hands. Identifying the strongest presence of attackers, Primus adjusted his route to intercept Bile himself close to the hangar. The ancient Astartes anticipated little resistance from Bile and his misbegotten creations, though as we all know, this has been the last mistake of many in the past who have opposed the primogenitor. This, and Porter, quite possibly one of the most efficient living weapons in the galaxy, was again at the side of her master. More shaking throughout the massive vessel as yet another wave of boarding torpedoes struck home. Without the outer defences online, the crew's only way to fight the forces of chaos were to repel boarders manually. No small feat when considering the frenzied nature of their foe. On the surface of Avernus, forge fiends and shambling defilers provided the corrupted Astartes with long-range support, plasma and battle cannons relentlessly maintaining pressure on the Knights of House Tyrannus. The Astartes were pinned in place by the Knights' return fire, though the Knights were in a position that saw them unable to withdraw without turning their less armoured flanks on the foe. A melee of noble knight and oversized demon engines broke out as the oversized corrupted creatures reached the Knights' lines. They were being attacked on all sides. They had to break out to charge the foe, whilst the remaining larger guns could bring their might to bear. The Knight bodies crashed into the hordes of demon engine and Astartes alike, their valiant charge hitting home under a torrent of withering fire from the corrupted forces of the enemy. In the midst of them, the motive force coursing through Knight construct and pilot alike. Heavy bolters raked up the side of demon creatures, whilst the large caliber explosive shells tore through renegade Astartes. Chain fists tore through flanks of demon engines, and flame cannons washed over the ranks of enemy, construct and infantry alike, in a punishing torrent of supercharged heat. Demon engines flickered as they were struck, their anchoring to the warp beyond providing some shielding for the beasts. Traitor space marines roasted in their armour as the Knights strode on, making the most from their impetus of their charge, carrying the Knights through the heretic lines, limbs spilling murder as they walked on. Lord Thrul was spotted in the swirl of the melee, riding a hell-strided demon engine. Chaotic data streams were loosed from the Lord, corrupting the connection between the lead Knight and pilot. When he came round, the Knight was collapsed, the pilot hanging from his harness. The corrupted code it released had severed the pilot from the noosphere. He was prone and helpless. The Lord Discordant, Thrul himself, now strode towards the downed Knight, massive chainblade in hand. Both rider and mount looked to be savouring the killing moment, soon to arrive. The Chaos Lord Thrul tried to corrupt the Knight and the pilot within, but the first ancient pilot appeared in the immaterium scene where the two had met, denouncing the evil before it. With an immense effort, the link between both pilot and Knight reconnected, and the immense construct rose to its feet. Corrupted Lord and Mechanicus Knight facing off amid the swirling, chaotic melee surrounding them. Meanwhile, upon the Zarquazitor, Belisarius realised the trap for what it was. Throughout the mighty vessel, weapon systems were within 5 minutes of being back within his control. Vox channels throughout the ship were even functional, save for the area of the vessel Bile himself currently resided within. There were numerous attacks by beastmen and mutants all through the Zarquazitor. However, these were being contained. The Zhang Primus Portum was heavily guarded. There was no way Bile could pierce the defences, considering the ragged forces under his command. It made no sense, Cawl mused. Why would Fabius announce his intentions to obtain the Zhang Primus to Cawl, asking for it as he would have known that would obviously be fruitless, then trying to take it with such an underwhelming force as this? Bile was no suicidal fool to attempt such a headlong, almost suicidal attempt. Then, with stark realization, Cawl was aware. The Manflayer never intended to attain the Zhang Primus Portum. He tried to hail Alpha Primus, but no response. As is so typical, the talented stoic Astartes was en route to intercept Bile by himself, the marine seeking to cut the head from a snake which had long troubled the Imperium of man. Every trick, every genetic secret and more is coded within Primus. Bile, the the cunning monster. Completely ignorant of the trap he was charging headlong into, Primus came upon the first beastmen. They were clutching shiny objects taken from the dead, as is their animalistic simple way. Primus did not even use weapons to end these beasts. He launched himself from the stairs, landing on the first, his immense weight making a mess of the mutant beneath. The second beastman, stunned and fearful, was dispatched a moment later. Primus punched the creature's head clean off its shoulders. Primus was wading now through the beastmen ranks upon the Tsar Quasitor. His chainsword was making sweeping arcs parting the bellies of mutants, whilst return thrust chewed limbs from bodies. As other mutants took shelter behind their sword-armed compatriots, Alpha Primus simply ran over these, ending their lives in gory, bone-splintering messes as the immense weight of a fully armoured Primaris Marine bore down with each footfall. He slew more still, slaying waves of beasts while also killing Bile's Minotaur lieutenant Brutus in single combat. Finally, after killing the spider's champion, he found Bile within the threshold to the landing zone. But Fabius Bile was not alone. Believing the Minotaur Brutus to be the best Fabius had brought, Primus was proven to be sorely mistaken. Silently behind him, Porta ran, close to 40 miles an hour, and launched herself at the indomitable Primus. Battle was joined. Perfect creations now fought bitterly against one another, each an avatar of their primogenitor. For a seemingly small woman, Porta's strength and speed were well beyond what she appeared. Finally though, the combat skill which Primus had honed over untold millennia, paired with his awesome Psychana talents, defeated Porta. Her prone form caught up in debris after being telekinetically hurled by Primus. Fabius fired his Zyklos Needler in Primus' unprotected face, Porta having ripped off his helmet in their skirmish. The spider was then rendered helpless, but as Primus made ready to end the infamous geneticist, the effect from the Zyklos ammunition began to take their toll on even his physiology. Numbness overtook the giant, releasing his psychic grip on Fabius and crashing Primus face first into the ground, conscious but completely paralysed. Even this did not render Alpha Primus completely helpless though, as he balled his fist, ready to strike Fabius who had come too close. Before he could, Fabius pressed his demon weapon Torment into the Astarte's flesh, racking his body with unbelievable heights of pain, further disabling him. As he lay prone, Fabius began his study of the giant, stabbing deeply into his chest. When Cawl finally located Bile and Primus, the apothecary had stripped the loyal Astartes of his chest plate, and his undersuit was sliced away. Bile's apothecary's tools were red, covered in Alpha Primus blood, the prone man's chest and neck sliced open. Cawl protested, limping towards the prone form of his friend, as Alpha Primus gene seed was sucked up into a vat of clear sustaining liquid. Cawl could not intervene. Porta stalked him, ready to end the Magos at the slightest threat posed to her master, whereas Fabius Chirurgeon, in itself a sentient being from all the years spent within the warp, held a buzzing chainsaw to Primus' head. If Cawl tried to save the life of Primus, they would both be doomed. Fabius explained he had heard tales of the mighty warrior which fought beside the Archmagos, and if anything, they were an understatement. He truly was a magnificent work of art, beyond what Fabius could have imagined. The Clone Lord did not require the same Primus Portum. All the secrets he required to create armies of superpowered Astartes lay within Primus. "I guess you have not told Guillaume what you have made here," Bile asked. "I would guess you have not told him either, have you?" He gestured toward Primus. "I guess there could be no other reason he wouldn't have used the full extent of his abilities when he came against us. I was worried, but he doesn't know what he is, does he?" Many lines of gene seed lay within Alpha Primus, but there were also traces of Belisarius himself strewn throughout his being. Cawl was torn between what to do, as Bile told him he was almost finished, With a final effort, Primus' progenoid glands came free. "If you are quick once I am gone, you can save him," stated Bile, also stating he would not kill Cawl either. He refused to end such perfect art, or the talented hands which crafted it. As he and Porter strode aboard Butcherbird, Bile stated that he really wished Cawl had listened, as they could have avoided all the unpleasantness. On Avernus, Kvo had recovered, disoriented on the ground in front of the webway gate through which the Dark Mechanicum servitors had made ingress below the ziggurat. The shattered remains of corrupted servitors and tech priests alike lay all about him, though he did not witness the turncoat priestess among the dead. Loyalist Castellan robots were laying low the forces of chaos. Between the robots present, their power fists were put to work, smashing the gate and the surrounding control pillars to pieces. Kvo and his allies, including other magi and Castellan robots, butchered their way from the bowels of the earth underneath the ziggurat into the chamber above. The area was swarming with corrupted constructs and heretic Astartes, with the Loyalist Mechanicus forces admirably holding their own. As Kvo surveyed the surrounds, he realised the mainstay of Loyalist forces lay dead. Scutari had been shot apart, and the larger constructs were in heaps of ruin. The Lords of the Magi were more or less holding back the waves of heretics, but they would soon become overrun by sheer numbers alone. Now though, Kvo's reinforcements had surfaced, and the tide would turn. The indomitable robots, having butchered dozens of servitors, now turned their attentions on the heretic Astartes. Walking through bolt and flame alike, their plasteel skin shielded them from the worst of incoming fire, whilst the traitors realised their reinforcements from the webway below had been defeated, and began to fall back. First in disciplined, ordered fire patterns, then at a disorganised sprint. Pursuing them outside explained why. The portals which the heretic forces had arrived through were closing due to the destruction the Castellan robots had wreaked upon the webway and controlling terminals. Most did make it, but a handful were left behind upon the field of battle, with there being no sign of Lord Thruel. A landscape of moorlands had been transformed into a scene of death and carnage. Upon the withdrawal of Chaos forces, the Conclave was called anew, Cawl striding among them, flanked by Primus and his friend Kvo. Victory over the vile Astartes forces had caused great jubilation among the forces of the Machine God, and as a result they had thrown themselves into renovating the inner chambers of the ziggurat. Wall-mounted devices were restored, and fine artwork was present throughout, ancient humans in bizarre modes of dress. Once more Belisarius Cawl met the dignitaries of the three Forge Worlds. Each would declare their final decision separately, as though they were one under the banner of the Machine God. They were individual in the decisions they each made. Akatran vowed they would aid Cawl in his efforts to the damned time-locked world. Their materials and expertise were at his disposal on one condition. Any Xenos tech discovered would be given over to those taking part in the expedition. Tigris concurred, pledging their assets for the same payment in Xenotech. Metallica, however, was not in agreement. They stated no good would come in tampering with the alien. There was no way to tell what horrors would be unleashed with such blind probing. Though in the spirit of the Conclave, they would not attempt to detain any present now. The Lector Dogmas of Metallica stated they would be sending a delegation to Mars to pursue the excommunication of those senior priests present, including Cawl himself. And with that final ill portent, the Metallican delegation left, not even contesting the rights to any of Pontus Avernus' secrets. They were serious indeed. Upon the Vesalius, Fabius Bile studied the gene seed extracted from Alpha Primus. Soon he would have Abaddon's demands met, and then he could truly begin to pore through the secrets locked within this genome. Meanwhile, within the holdings of the Dark Mechanicum in some wretched, corrupted corner of the galaxy, the true servants of the machine gathered around the sarcophagus which housed the Man of Iron gifted to them by Bile. they would make ready this potent vessel to once more give life to their master, Sota Nul, highest of the 9 disciples of Kelbor Hal. Let's detail some of the new lore not mentioned within this video, which featured in Genefather. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here guys, with some of it being hinted at or assumed to be true from certain characters' perspectives, which is honestly one of the greatest features of Black Library lore, so make sure you leave your speculation and opinion in the comments so we can chat. Thank you for sticking around this long. As a thank you, I'll let you guys know that one of our next videos will be the lore from the recent novel Creed, Ashes of Cadia. This novel came out roughly the same time as Genefather and is really interesting, but we'll save that one for next week. As for Guilliman's third demand, to better understand this, the intriguing one we alluded to at the start of the video, we must first quickly explain the nature of the two Cawl inferiors, linked between one another, one in the care of Rabute Guilliman and the other with Cawl. Belisarius has crafted what is called a Cawl inferior. Rabute's is paired with a bonded astropath for Rabute to communicate his missives to Cawl, whilst Belisarius astropaths is basically a bunch of brains in jars, 20 to be exact. Apparently they tend to last longer as a component, not the ideal situation for the astropath, but more efficient. The way the communion worked was powered by mostly Xenos components, Eldari as well as Necron, though the artifact responsible for opening demi portals into the warp was of ancient Terran design. It was through these portals that the communications between Cawl and Guilliman were sent, allowing the pair to communicate effectively despite the vast distance and warp anomalies between them. The Cawl inferiors would then communicate the messages to either Belisarius or Rabute. Now, Guilliman's demand. As a lot of you are no doubt aware, Rabute has been plagued by numerous missives from Belisarius to make him fabricated general of Mars. Except he hasn't. You see, when Cawl received Rabute's third point, this is to cease requesting this appointment, Cawl was shocked. He had never done such a thing, and he did not covet the fabricated general's position, for the primary fact he would have no time to himself to pursue his own ends. And so he has reached the conclusion that the Cawl inferior within Rabute's vessel has evolved its own ambitions and was attempting to act on them. Of course, we as the audience can suspect that perhaps Cawl's own inferior and that of Rabute may be even working in concert, so who knows whether the information reaching the pair is even accurate. Perhaps one of the most shocking points unveiled within Genefather is that Cawl has in the past created his own Guilliman. This isn't a cloned Primarch, but a consciousness simulacrum, which Cawl created prior to his waking of Rabute on Macragge. He claims that he had to be sure Rabute wouldn't just be another Horus, and so created this to run simulations to understand how Rabute would act. He's obviously used this numerous times running scenarios before approaching Rabute in person. Still, when awoken, the Guilliman simulacrum claims his real self would kill Belisarius for the liberty he has taken in creating it, before later admitting he probably would not. Although, given the temper of the Guilliman simulacrum is somewhat toned down compared to the actual Primarch, perhaps the real Rabute would. When Belisarius unveils how he intended to save the Imperium, however, the simulacrum raged. Though we were not privy to the details Cawl shared, makes you think there's probably more than what's unveiled in the novel. Cawl believed the technological template to create a Primarch was destroyed by the Emperor himself. Not the entire process, mind you, but the patterns for the Centaurus lobe of the Immortus gland. All other information regarding the creation is contained within the Sang Primus Portum, which is suitably secured aboard Cawl's vessel, the Zarquasator. During the events of Genefather, we are privy to a memory of Fabius of the day he was first selected to be trained as an apothecary. 20 Emperor's children stood in 2 ranks of 10. Their banners bore the icons of noble European families. This was the earliest of days, whilst Fabius was but a brother Astartes, before even the Primarch Fulgrim was located. During this time, Fabius and his brothers worked under the tutelage of Ezekiel Zidane, and his team of capable scientists. Sedain explained to the Astartes the Emperor had decreed that within his legions, a portion of his warriors should be given full knowledge of Space Marine physiology. You are to be apothecaries, the first tenders of flesh. For the next 9 months you will learn under my command. These men and women will tutor you. You shall learn from those who made you. When your training is complete, you shall return to your legion and teach others what you have learned. You shall be the first of your kind. You have been selected personally. All of you have some knowledge of the Ars Medicae, or have shown interest or aptitude in battlefield medicine. Stopping in front of Fabius, Sedain stated, "Some of you have more experience than others." Later, during discussions with Porter, Fabius Bile states Cawl is made up of several personalities and reasons that one of Cawl's personalities could be Sedain. For those unaware, this is a correct assumption. When close to an open webway gate dealing with the agents of the Dark Mechanicum, Fabius experienced a memory recollection and subliminal hint that saw Cawl superimposed over Sedain. This was during Bile's recollection of becoming an apothecary. This could perhaps be a hint from someone or something influencing him via the webway gate nearby. By now, many of us lore nerds are aware that Belisarius seeks to resurrect his now ancient friend Kvo. The most promising iteration yet is very self-aware compared to previous selves and is fed up, frankly. He first inquires to Cawl what number in the line of resurrections he is, and when Cawl states he is the 89th, Friedrich tells him to just let him die. He has memories of the previous bodies he has been resurrected within, except for the 88th, as that Kvo is on the way to Naeselius during the events of Genefather. Cawl has been tinkering with Kvo's soul, rather than just his brain. As his friend died relatively quickly, the brain was not stored in the best condition. A soul once within the warp is not in a good place, so Cawl explains he has to keep it out of there. The current Kvo does not have an entire brain, only about 20% of it, so Belisarius seeks to realign the lost particles of Kvo's soul to once again make him whole. By the end of the novel, Kvo and Cawl's friendship is firmly rekindled. Fabius Bile's new man Porter is more than that. Fabius made her ancestors the new men often referred to, and they themselves built upon Fabius' design. We do learn some of the advanced biological enhancements present within Porter. When doing battle against warp-fueled machine beasts of chaos, Porter floods her body with oxygen, charging her hydrostatic muscles. Her heartstrings thrum with sequenced beats, in her chronoception stretches, slowing the movements of the beast things galloping towards her until they move so slowly they appear to not move at all. Her metabolism burnt with the effort, cooling veins in her intercostal spaces opening, making her joints ache. These flooded with blood that was whisked away to vestibular heat exchangers near her thoracic spine. The resultant hot air was vented from her breathing spiracles. Her brain pulsed with heat. She would be dizzy when she re-entered subjective time, yet the moments she gained were invaluable. Cawl suspects the artificial planet of Pontus Avernus may have been a neutral meeting place for ancient empires of different races. He considers that the Eldari prior to the fall and the ancient advanced peoples of Earth would have existed simultaneously, not aware of any cataclysmic wars between them or indeed others at the time. Perhaps they met at places like this. As we learnt within the story, Cawl was correct that there is a webway gate present on the planet, and he is eager to see what the various Mechanicus excavation crews uncover. Underground, within tunnels made by Avernus creators, there were paintings on the walls of various races. Some appeared to be human in appearance, and others were of obvious Xenos origin. Although the Magos present could not translate all the writings which accompanied the pictures, there did seem to be echoes of High Gothic, possibly the Tongue of Old Earth, ancestor to a lot of languages, but they could not tell. Avernus may well have been a diplomatic venue after all. The Necron cryptech which Cawl stole from the Inquisition breaks loose when the forces of the Dark Mechanicum allied with Bile overcome the Zarque's Tor systems. Her name is Aseneth Ayu. Cawl's intent had always been to turn her and have her aid him, though for the longest time she refused and instead would always threaten to kill him. She did try to kill Cawl during Fabius Bile boarding, when she's gotten free, though at the end of the novel, Aseneth Ayu was given two choices: to enter stasis until Cawl got around to dissecting her brain, or aiding him in his work, gaining his trust to one day attain her own body again. Belisarius put her back into stasis to consider his proposal. It has been some time since we've experienced the Dark Mechanicum within 40k lore. Along with the recent creation of Vashtor, do you think we'll see some Dark Mechanicum models or even faction being released for the tabletop soon? I for one would enjoy the conversion and kitbash opportunities to create some hell machines, not to mention the new lore available within their very own codex. Whilst Alpha Primus battles against Bile and Porter, Bile senses the seed of the Cyclops within Primus. Whilst Bile and Cawl discuss what Primus truly is, Cawl reflects within himself that if his true nature was discovered, it would likely result in a death sentence for Cawl. Given a piece of himself was within Primus, he admitted to seeing him as a son and loving him. It seems there is likely the essence of several Primarchs within Alpha Primus. I've linked some great videos for you in the description below, so if you enjoyed this, go check them out or head over to the main channel. If you'd like to support my work so I don't need to rely just on AdSense, keep in mind we now have a Patreon. If you're interested in what you gain through that Patreon, check out the link in the description. If you're looking to save 21% off 40k, open the description below and check out the link to Gap Games. That's a great way to support a local business and Titan Wargaming. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, remember to share, like and subscribe, as it makes a massive difference to our small growing channel and community. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. The best part of doing YouTube is interacting with you guys, so be sure to leave a comment below with your own speculations, or simply something to help the fickle machine spirit that is the YouTube algorithm spread the video to others. Until next time, take it easy and have a good one.